Hello, you're listening to Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library podcast. Welcome to another episode of Overdoing It, where our team of library workers dish about their latest reads, views, and passions alongside fascinating conversations with local luminaries. I'm your host, Tayla, and the branch librarian at the Oaklawn Branch Library in Cranston, and my pronouns are she, her. Let's dive in and discover who our guest is today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Russo, a proud native and still resident of Rhode Island. I am the best-selling author of 11 novels. Most are historical fiction, but they fall under many subgenres: thrillers, women's fiction, fantasy, and my latest work, Vincent'S, is biographical fiction. I'm the single mother of 2 sons, one an opera singer and one a chef, and I am one of the oldest yoga aerialists practicing in the U.S. I am she, her.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Slightly unfortunate for me because I'm intrigued by the yoga aerialist that we won't have time to go into that much today. But you are here to talk about your career as an author and your latest book, Vincent'S Women. But before we get into that, let's start off as we always do with what have you been reading?
Well, as an author and a ghostwriter of historical fiction, the amount of nonfiction research books I have to read could build a house. But when I do get to read, and I don't mean to plug a friend, but I just finished a work by Michelle Moran, who is a good friend of mine, her Maria. As a person growing up when that movie came out, I was all about The Sound of Music. And so when I heard, there was this deeper dive into what her real life was like, I had to read it. Part of me was scared that this iconic story would be ruined for me, but it actually enhanced it. It gave me the truth, enhancing Maria and her story. It was really beautifully done. And then, just because I was noticing the trend, there are a lot of books about books, mostly fantasy books, The Midnight Library, The Lost Bookshop. They were all fascinating because, and this is something that is happening, especially in the historical fictional genre, our POVs are becoming other things rather than people.
Oh, okay.
And in these stories, that's what's happening. These books, these libraries, these places are becoming a character of their own. And I found them fascinating.
I was just looking at my reading record to see if it was the same book. I read Maria last summer and I really enjoyed it. The Sound of Music was one of the first musicals I ever saw, on TV, had ever consumed.
Right.
And I remember from when I first watched it, I was like, well, I want to play Liesl someday because I was a young girl. And so that was the next. But then as I got older, I was like, I want to play Maria someday.
Of course.
So it's always had a really special place in my heart that I really just love that show. And
did you find that the book ruined it for you or enhanced it for you?
No, I thought it was really interesting because I didn't know. I didn't know about all the stuff behind the scenes with the production going on Broadway, and that there was the Von Trapp family didn't really want it to happen. Maria didn't really like the choices that they had made, and but it was kind of also a thing of them selling the rights to their stories.
And I related to that because the dream of every author is that a production company picks it up and makes a movie out of it. But it did hammer home, watch what you're signing.
Yeah.
When you sign it over completely, she really didn't have legal ground to stand on because they just signed their story over.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Michelle Moran so beautifully laid out what actually happened for us in that book.
Yeah. And then I Googled all the different Von Trapp children afterwards.
Yeah, me too.
Because the author endnotes had said that one of them was still alive, but would be older. So I was like, I got to check if they're still alive.
Yeah.
They were last time I checked.
Yeah, I believe.
Hans, I think.
And he wasn't even the youngest, but I think he's the last to survive.
But yeah, no, so it was something that really, like you said, enhanced it for me. And
that's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that was a great fear of mine.
Yeah.
You know, this is an iconic person to me. I mean, I'm so old that I saw it in the movie theaters as a child. You know, I saw it from the get-go. And so I was a little scared to, don't touch this, you know, don't touch my baby doll, you know, my precious. But Michelle never failed. She really never failed.
Now I want to watch The Sound of Music again.
I know. Let's go.
But in terms of what I've been reading, so in a very different tone.
Love to hear what librarians are reading. Oh, wait.
I am reading the latest of the Fourth Wing series. It's Rebecca Yarros. So first one was Fourth Wing, then Iron Flame, and now Onyx Storm is the last one. I'm like less than 100 pages from the end. Yeah, and I kind of I thought this was supposed to be a trilogy, but like she's got a lot still to wrap up, and I don't think it's getting wrapped up. So my partner was like, she's going to keep writing these books because they're making her money.
That happens.
And I was like, yeah.
Well, look, Suzanne Collins just came out with another Hunger Games book. Diana Gabaldon is still writing her Outlander series. But when you get a moneymaker like that, I mean, you know, it's that constant balance for any creative is, do we stay true to our creative nature or do we go after the money? To put it bluntly, we have to make those decisions. I have to say, you know, my works have spanned early Renaissance periods, and then there was a trilogy, and then I jumped to the Gilded Age, and I jumped genres, I jumped styles. I like to take my creative car out for a spin and see what I can do with it. Doing the same thing over and over again, I think I'd bore myself silly. So why would I do that to my readers?
For sure. And I don't know, it's still entertaining for me, but I also still don't know exactly how it ends. And as someone else on the internet described the ending of the last book made them feral and unwell. And I thought that was an apt description. So I was like,
God, I think as a writer, I would dig a hole, crawl in it, and not come out for a very
no, they meant it as a compliment. They meant it was like so wild that they just the ending was just like
wonderful.
Sorry. But they meant like that it was just like so wild of like, where are we going to go from here?
Oh, that's cool. I have to pick that up.
It's romantasy in this new kind of like burgeoning age of romantasy. So there are dragons and there is magic in this world. And there's a like kind of a war college is where it takes place. So it kind of is itching like the magical schools, like scratching the magical school itch a little bit, especially the first one. As we go on in the series, it's less focused on their time in school and more focused on like the ongoing war that's going on.
Right. So Harry Potter at the beginning and then Game of Thrones at the end.
Well, the school itself is kind of Game of Thrones in the sense that it's
that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, so it's a school that trains all of the kind of different roles in the military.
Sure.
But they're into different quadrants, and the riders quadrant trains all of the people who will ride dragons. Well, presumably, if they make it there. But it's this whole thing that it's very cutthroat, and like the whole thing is like dragons do not accept weakness, so we need to cull out the weak.
So it sounds like really great world building.
Yeah, the world building is really interesting.
I mean, any kind of fantasy, even historical fiction, because we're world building, we just happen to be rebuilding 500-year-old societies. But without really good world building, you're not going to buy into the story.
Yeah. So the world is really fun. And the dragons like kind of have all their own like personalities. And so that's like fun and interesting to see.
Well, fantasy is really coming into its own right now. In fact, I'm speaking at the Historical Novel Society conference at the end of June in Vegas. And the theme of the whole conference is the changing face of historical fiction and its subgenres. And one of the biggest that people asked for workshops on was historical fantasy. And it's funny because my fourth book, The King's Agent, I took my favorite video game, The Legend of Zelda.
Nice.
For which I have a tattoo. I have the Triforce tattooed on me.
Awesome.
And I merged that with Dante's Divine Comedy.
Okay.
To create an art fantasy book. And that was long before historical and fantasy were merging. And I got a starred review from Publishers Weekly on it. And it started out just as I love Zelda. I want to do a Zelda-esque story. It was just this fun thing. And it turned out to be one of my most critically acclaimed books. So fantasy in all areas is coming back very strong.
And this kind of reminds me, I haven't read any of her stuff yet, but I want to check it out. Her name's Elizabeth Wheatley, and she makes short form videos. So I assume they're on TikTok. I watch them on YouTube Shorts because
we get to choose.
Yeah. So yeah, she just recently released a historical fantasy that was like Anglo-Saxon inspired.
Right.
But there's fantastical elements too. But I love that she does these things where she kind of breaks down the minutia of the subgenres, mostly in romance, being like that's where she's coming from as like a fantasy romance person. But like she made one video kind of explaining like what's the difference between fantasy romance and like paranormal romance and like,
right.
And I just really enjoy her like explaining it. I guess I'm professionally curious because sometimes you do hear all these buzzword subgenres and you're all like,
so much has to do with algorithms.
Yeah. And you're kind of just like, what is the difference? She's done a video where she explains like low versus high fantasy. If you're interested in romance at all and marketing as a self-published person.
This is a real almost crisis that historical fiction writers are dealing with. Here in the US, historical fiction is kind of waning. Where in the UK and Europe, it is flying off the shelves. They cannot keep my books stocked over there. So as American writers, we want our American readers. And so we are looking more into these subgenres. And we're looking for a publisher to pick the right ones for our books so that the ratings reflect the readership of that genre. It's so technical and complicated. And let me tell you, I'll get notes from my agent or editor saying, we haven't seen you posting on social media. And I just want to yell at them. Hemingway never had to worry about that.
Hemingway didn't have to post on Blue Sky.
No, he did not. He said, you deal with the rest. That's the writing I want to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's so much more complicated now.
Yeah.
And then they'll turn around and say, where's your next book? I'll say, well, it was busy in all those hours you had me doing social media and everything, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely an element that people have never had to deal with before.
Never. And it's taking more and more time.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm getting to the point where I need an intern. Yes. Anybody out there, get in touch.
So we've already started talking about short form videos a little bit. So I think that takes us nicely into, have you been watching anything interesting lately?
I have.
Okay.
I just finished last night, 1923.
Okay, yep.
With Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Beautifully done, beautifully written. Ford and Mirren together, why nobody put them together before is beyond me. They are magic on the screen. The history was so true to fact, the brutality of that time period and that location, they nailed it in every sense of the word. They had me laughing in tears, the whole 9 yards. I thought it was beautifully, beautifully done. And I was sorry to see there were only 2 seasons. Yeah, loved it.
So are you invested in like the whole kind of Yellowstone universe?
I did the whole Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And now 19. Yes, I am. They hooked me really. Now, I wasn't big on Westerns, but you put Kevin Costner in anything, and still to this day, he gets me going. I'm sorry. I actually have a signed autographed picture from him from when he did Dances with Wolves, which is when I thought he was at his most beautiful. He was just, to die for, still is. And so I wasn't crazy about Western, but it had Kevin Costner, and then I got hooked, and then the writing is just good. And Taylor Sheridan, who is the director, producer, he's got his hand in a lot. He's brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm not like fully caught up or anything, but my parents were really into it because they broke the most recent season up into like 2 halves, right? They did like a break and it was like the second half.
You know, I waited until it was all available,
Okay,
and then I kind of binged.
Yeah.
I just like to do that because to me, it's more like a book.
Yeah.
And each episode is a chapter. And if you can binge through, it's like reading a book.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I saw some of the arc with like him running for governor of Montana and stuff.
I have to tell you, I think 1923 is better than Yellowstone.
I've heard a lot of great things about it. But I don't know. I feel like I was just there for like the Beth drama. So I was like, someone just tell me when Beth tells Rip her secret. I just want to see that scene. I don't care about anything else in the show.
I'm ticking along because you got to experience things.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like to spoil things for people.
So yeah, I don't know if I'll ever like get caught up or watch all of it. But what I saw was very much like you just get sucked in.
That happens to me. I'll start a series and then life happens and I forget I even started it and never get back to it. But wouldn't that be the mark of outstanding television? I knew no matter how busy or for how long, it'd be in the back of my mind, get back to it. So it's the same thing with books. I mean, people have to put them down at times, but you want to make sure that they're itching to pick them back up.
For sure. So I did finally start the new Daredevil show on Disney Plus, but we're only 2 episodes in. We watched 2 episodes over the weekend. That was all we really had time for. So I don't feel like I still feel like so far I'm enjoying it, but I still feel like I can't really give an assessment yet because we're like too soon. But something that I do feel comfortable giving a full endorsement of because it's a movie I've now watched multiple times and it's something that it has a really star-studded cast, so I'm kind of disappointed it's not as known. It's called This Is Where I Leave You. It came out in like 2014, I think.
I know that title. Who's in it?
So Adam Driver is the youngest son.
He's now on my hot list. Yes.
Tina Fey is in it. She's the only daughter of the family. Jason Bateman is like middle child.
I watched it.
And Jane Fonda is the mom.
Yes.
And the mom is an author. And she wrote about her family. And so there's a kind of dynamic there that the family is somewhat resentful that some of their like secrets and kind of childhood awkwardness and stuff was like kind of out there for the world. But the premise of the movie is that it's this family of 4 kids and their father dies. And Jane Fonda's character, the mother, says that his dying wish was for them to sit Shiva. That's what she tells them all because they're half Jewish. And it's this whole thing that they all have their own like messy, complicated lives as adults. And they're all like forced back into their childhood home together to grieve and work through this whole thing. But I think it's like really lovely movie about grief and about family and about how complicated family can be, but like ultimately that they are like there for you. I thought it was like a really good balance of like, I would describe it as like a dramedy. So like obviously there was like a lot of drama there, but there was some really like witty writing and stuff.
And the cast was able to pull it off.
To do both. So if you missed it 10 years ago, go find This Is Where I Leave You.
Yeah.
It still holds up.
It does, yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, good movie. Sounds like we have a lot in common.
Moving on to your book, to kind of get us started for people who aren't familiar with your work, Can you talk a little bit about how you got into writing and
how I got into writing? This is so cliche, and I personally think she stole my words, but as Gaga says, baby, I was born this way. I started writing. My mother has stories that I wrote as a little child that are, they're falling apart at the creases. They're yellow. One was the pink pussycat who wanted to run for president so that she could end the Vietnam War. That's how young I started writing.
At this point, I would vote, yes.
Yeah.
I would vote.
I'm with you there, honey. Virtual high five. Yes. The numbers 2 and 4 were in love, but 3 kept getting in the way. So they invented counting by even numbers so that they could be together. And I was like 6 and 7 writing these stories. Every parent teacher conference, the teachers would tell my father, a banker, she writes in English, she writes in math, she writes in science, she writes in recess. The girl's going to be a writer. And my father said, no, she's going to get a real job. And so when I went off to college, I got 2 degrees. I got the communications marketing one to appease him, and I got the English one to appease me.
I jokingly say that being a communications major is when you want to be an English major, but you don't want to disappoint your parents. And this is as an English major.
I just proved your theory right. You're not making it up. And I did work in marketing and advertising for a long time. When the children came along, I ended up working nonprofits, mostly theaters, festival, ballet, and all of that. In the meantime, I was trying to work a job, take care of the house. So while I was doing everything, I was also pecking away. My first bylines were actually book reviews in newspapers, if you can believe it, all across the country. And then I got a couple of horror short stories in anthologies. And once you have that in your resume, once you have that to put in a cover letter, then you go write your book. And that's what I did. But it came about in a very strange way. In the summer of 2002, I came down with what I thought was a horrific case of the flu. And the early symptoms went away, but the bone pain and the joint swelling and all these weird never went away. 2.5 years, 7 doctors later, Lyme disease. They put in a port for a year and a half. I was stuck with needles in massive doses, but it was too late. So during that time period when I was treated, they said, just rest. I don't rest easily. I started writing my first book. After the research phase, I wrote the entire book in 9 weeks.
Wow.
Yep. I sent it off. I landed an agent in 2 months, and she sold me in 4 months with the 2-book deal. It doesn't happen like that anymore. But that was my story. The thing that really fries my noodle is, and I hope that somewhere somebody has an answer to, if I have to ask it in a different realm, I'm happy with that. If I did not get the Lyme disease, if I was not forced to quit the jobs and be home, would I ever have found my way back to my true path? It's interesting, like the chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
That's how my career started, and I've never looked back.
That's the lovely positive.
It is.
Spin on it.
And rainy days like this, I feel like saying to the powers that be, okay, it served its purpose. It got me to my true path. Can we make it go away now? But obviously that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I've learned to work around it and work through it. And it is a silver lining.
And so, like you had said earlier, your true path has led you 11 books later.
11 books, starting on my 12th.
And so your most recent was Vincent's Women. So do you want to talk a little bit about that book and kind of what led you to that story? Because you said this is the first time that you wrote biological fiction.
Biological fiction. That would
be wild.
If you could do it and hold readers' attention, you'd be number one in that category because who's else writing biological fiction?
Yeah. It just makes me think, well, there's this manga called Cells at Work where the main characters are blood cells and it goes all through the body and stuff.
Oh,
so that
really?
was the only thing I could think that I was like, oh, maybe that's what it would be like.
My sons are seriously into manga, so they probably know about it. Yeah.
But you wrote biographical fiction for the first time. So can you talk a little bit on that?
Oh, it actually came about because my own love life is so is so not good. So I had come home from yet another first and last date, just feeling awful. I'm on my couch. I'm having this really good pity party. I mean, there's trashy television on, there's junk food surrounding me. And at some point I look up and my apartment was an open floor plan with cathedral ceilings. It was stunning. And my dining nook was all Vincent. It was his portraits, his prints, everything Vincent. And at some point in this pity party, I looked up and I looked straight into the eyes of Vincent. And I said, all right, Vincent, we know you liked prostitutes, but that couldn't be the be all and end all of your love story. What was it? Well, of course, the portrait didn't answer me. So I started digging and my mind was blown. The tagline for this book is, what if everything we think we know about Vincent van Gogh is all lies? And after 3 years, the most I've ever done for any book, 3 years of research, reading over 1,000 letters to, by, or about Vincent, everything we think we know about Vincent van Gogh is a lie. And I had just started researching from my own personal curiosity, but when I started finding all this, I knew it was a story that had to be told. Yes, I found the doctor's drawing of when he lost his ear, which under modern forensic tells a completely different story than what was told back then. The American Journal of Forensics and Medical Pathology released a study. They actually took the police reports and what they knew of Vincent's death and used modern forensic technology. And their conclusion was it was not suicide. And that's how I wrote the book. I wrote every myth, and yet I have substantial research to back it all up. But what I love about this book is that Vincent never tells us his story. It is all the loves in his life that tell the story. From the first, his mother, to the last, the woman he could have had a happy life, and the major women in between. So we learn not only his story from birth to death, which has never been done. No book or movie on Vincent van Gogh has told us his story from birth to death. How do you get a picture of a life without seeing it in its entirety? But we also get the forgotten history of these women who made substantial impacts on his life and his art. And I was just overcome. And it is doing phenomenally. I'm pleased to say that most believe the research that I present.
At any point, did you feel compelled to put all this research together in something that was like purely nonfiction to present all of this stuff?
I did. In the world of publishing, the agent kind of nixed that idea because I don't have a brand in that. And I've got a pretty good following now. But there were a lot of, in fact, the only bad reviews I have were people who said, oh, I didn't realize this was a novel.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The description can kind of make it sound that way, but I am a deeply empathic writer. The emotions are there, they're raw, they're felt. And I get complimented on that quite often, luckily. And so I think once you get into it, you feel everything that these women felt, even Vincent felt. You feel it all. You see it all. It is what I consider my greatest work.
Yet.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, is there anything else that you want our audience to know about Vincent's Women or your work before we wrap up?
As I said at the top of the show, yes, I'm a historical fiction writer, but they're all over the place. For example, if you're a Rhode Islander, the two books before Vincent, Gilded Dreams and Gilded Summers, they're international bestsellers, and they're set in Newport, entirely in Newport. I lived and worked there for a time in my life and fell in love, as most people do when they go to Newport. A lot of people are saying that Julian Fellows ripped me off with The Gilded Age, which is completely ridiculous to think that Julian Fellows would have heard of me. But I am on the shelves in where people sit, section Gilded Age. It's me and Julian Fellows on the shelves, and people love sending me pictures of that. So my writing does span. There's a little bit of everything. My books are kind of like Forrest Gump. You never know what you're going to get.
I love that.
Yeah. And it challenges me as well as the readers. It exposes me to new subgenres as well as the readers. So I like being spontaneous. I don't want to be pigeonholed,
Yeah.
Oh, this is a great story. So I did write a trilogy. It's called The Da Vinci's Disciples. It is about a secret group of women artists set in Florence, Italy, when the Medicis were in control during one of the greatest conspiracies, true conspiracies, that led all the way to the Vatican. They only got one of the Medici brothers. They were trying to kill two. They only got one. The other went on a rampage of revenge that was unlike any other. He would take men, put them in a cart, and take them around the government square. At one corner, they would have their nose cut off. At another corner, they'd be castrated. And then they would go on to be hung. Writers will tell you that they put people they know into their books. Yeah, I put my ex-husband into that role. And it was so satisfying that I actually sent it to my sons. And I said, I won't publish this if you don't want me to, because people who know us are going to know. I said, go for it. So I went for it. And it was one of the most satisfying things I ever wrote. And yet it is pure fact. It is based on pure fact. It really is. I love that trilogy. That trilogy has all kinds of good, juicy stuff in it. And a lot of male readership like it because there's a lot of blood and gore and battle. Like I said, I got something for everybody.
Well, that's great. So we wrap up the show with a segment I call The Last Chapter, where we talk about a bookish or a library-related question. And I thought, as you being a writer, that I would ask if you could rewrite a book from another character's point of view, what book and what character would you choose?
The first thing that came to mind was Gone with the Wind.
Okay.
From Rhett Butler's point of view.
I'm not super familiar with Gone with the Wind.
Oh my God, woman. Go now. It is phenomenal, but it is all scarlet. And just like with Vincent's women, I feel, and with most of my books, I feel the women in history have been left out of history because it was written by old white guys. So they're not putting women or people of color or anything in there. His story, his insight into the true Scarlet. Margaret Mitchell revealed it only in tiny bits and pieces, but I found those bits and pieces of his insight so fascinating, so intuitive, so intellectual. I would love to be inside his head and see that whole story. He's against the Civil War. He's doing everything to avoid it. And yet at the pinnacle moment, he jumps in and fights. What changed his whole mentality? So yeah, that would be one that I would rewrite. Yeah, for sure. Going in the opposite direction of what I usually do. But I like telling the untold story.
Yeah. And I totally agree. I've said it on the show multiple times before that I don't usually find myself gravitating towards history in terms of like nonfiction. I mean, I'm not a big historical fiction reader either, just because like, I don't know. I like fantasy and sci-fi and stuff more. But I've said it on the show before that the thing that really about a lot of different history is what was it like to live like every day? Like I find like clothing history, like dress history, like super fascinating because it's like this is what everyday people were wearing. I mean, it's also lovely to watch the videos to be like this is what the queen would be wearing, you know, or
Right.
like this is what people in court
Right.
would be wearing
Right.
because
But
they're
it's nice to
gorgeous.
know what everyday life was.
Yeah, but it's also nice to see, so like I've watched videos online of like, yeah, this is what a woman would wear at this time. This is, you know,
Right.
a middle to lower middle class woman, so she would dress herself by herself.
Right. Right.
And so she would have these clothing so she could do
we
that.
did not rehearse. We did not rehearse this. You did not tee this up for it. But I have to tell you, that is the number one compliment I get on my books, is that my descriptive detail is so rich that they've learned more about the historical period from my books than they ever learned in school, and that they felt completely immersed in the time period. It is something I truly pride myself on, but it is something that comes with day after day after day, some nights of research. My typical research is a year to a year and a half. It takes me longer to write the book than to read, but it shows when a reader says that to me, it was worth it. That's what books are meant to do: transport us, completely immerse us in other worlds, whether they're completely magical and fantasy or whether they're our past and something we should learn from. That's what books should do. And I'm proud to be part of that world.
Yeah, and I think like historical fiction is a very, I would say, like female dominated subgenre.
It is.
And like it gets very wrapped up there and tied up with women's fiction. But on the flip side of that, it is allowing women to tell women's stories about the past in a way that we're not getting from mainstream history.
Vincent is the first man that I've written about, though I was really writing about his women.
Yeah.
But you're getting his whole life story throughout. But he is the first male to take a leading role in my books, in all of my 11 books. Yeah. No, that women's history, what we've been left out, I think of Lucrezia Medici. We're talking early 1400s. She was a accomplished writer. She held salons with the greatest thinkers, scientists, architects, artists, everything. And it was 1400s. And yet hardly anybody knows she existed and the contributions she made. In fact, many people feel that if not for her early contribution to the artistic scene in Florence, there would have not been a Renaissance.
Wow.
And yet hardly anybody knows about her. Yeah, it's time for our place in the sun.
For sure. All right. So
I know we've been all over the place here. I hope that's okay.
Yes, that's what we're here for.
All right.
So
I really enjoyed talking to you. I feel like you and I could go out for a drink and like talk Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised by a nerdy woman. I was raised to like come into my nerddom. And so I only think of it positive. I try to only think of it positively.
And when I say to my sons, do you have to keep buying manga? He turned to me and said, you're the one who got me hooked on comic books.
Yeah.
You know, because boys don't always take to reading. I saw that immediately. I knew the answer were comic books. And I started them off with the Superman. And now they're reading, my oldest son is reading Ulysses.
Good for him.
Right. So these young boys that I couldn't get to read are now reading mammoth works.
Yeah.
It's just, so are you out there? If you can't get your boys to read, stick a comic book.
Yeah, you were like ahead of the whole graphic novels for reluctant readers.
I was, but I was a real hippie mom.
I love that.
I really was. I would take them on adventures and we would have boxes where we would put souvenirs into all of them. And I'd take them to museums and I'd make them strike the pose that they saw in the paintings, you know? It was all creative. And now I've got an opera singer and a chef, you know? So I must have done something, as Maria would say.
Yes. I feel like that, okay. I will wrap up the show in 1 second. Sometimes I think I imagined that song in the musical. Like, that's how I feel like not talked about that song is. But it's like what I really like this idea of like, even though I'm not perfect and you're not perfect,
Right.
like we're like just two human beings. And even though I've endured all these things in my life and you have like you were saying about the Lyme disease leading to your book, it's if
Exactly.
even during all this bad
Exactly.
stuff, it must have
Right.
been something good
Something
because
good.
it led them to get so.
And
I think it's super romantic.
that's why I got my latest ink, and she's a female phoenix rising from the ashes.
Nice.
And I've had to do that a few times, and I have another one left ahead of me, but I must have done something good because I keep rising, you know? And that was something, yeah, just like you, that song really is powerful to me as well.
So, if people want to find out more about you and your books, where can they find you online?
They can find me at authordonnarusso.com. On Facebook, my Facebook page is Author Donna Russo. Instagram, it's Author Donna Russo. Basically, just Google Author Donna Russo and everything you might need will come up.
Fantastic.
I love speaking to book groups. If there are any book groups listening out there, it is one of those things that I didn't even know existed when my first book came out. And this woman reached out to me, and my first book was set in France, and they had made all French food.
Ooh.
And they gave me a lavender plant, and they had French music. It has become one of my favorite things. So that's why I don't plug it to sell books. I plug it because I love that experience. So yeah, it was one of those pleasant surprises nobody ever told me about.
There might be some library book groups that might take you up on it now.
I would love it. I would love it.
So thank you for joining me, and thank you everyone for listening. If you'd like to respond to our last chapter question or just reach out to the show, you can send us an email at overdoingitpod@gmail.com. And overdoing it is spelled overdue like all the library books at my house. You can find us on Instagram, also at overdoingitpod. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share with a friend and rate and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, as it helps us reach more Rhode Islanders. Overdoing It is proud to be a resident partner of the Rhode Island Center for the Book and is brought to you by library staff and community members across the Ocean State. The project has been funded in part by the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. Thank you again for listening, and this has been another episode of Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library Podcast. We're overdoing it, but you're doing just fine. His dying wish was for them to sit Shiva. I always get tongue-tied with the double S's for that.
That was a great one.
So